one thing that was a central theme in the film was Black identity. And this relationship between African Americans and Africans on the continent. Can you talk about what your relationship with the continent has been and what you see as the reconciliation between Africans and African Americans?
I mean, that's heavy, man. Like, I remember having a conversation about my own identity when I was very young, man. My parents had to sit me down and had a, you Black conversation. You know what I mean? And I think that it's a conversation that parents have to have in this country, and I think all over the world. Because it's a real thing. If you don't understand, not the fact that your skin looks like this, but if you don't understand the fact that the world is going to treat you a certain way because of that, and you have to be ready for that. It could cost you your life if your parents don't have that conversation with you. And so I had that conversation at an early age, and what I found was, I was a curious kid, and so it's like, we African American, and I was big on why, like what does that mean? You know what I mean? And so we come from the continent of Africa. We come from this place that you see on the map in school and that you see, on the globe at home. But I was in the Bay Area. I was as far away from the continent as you could be. And still find Black people, you know what I mean? Like, the next thing you hit is Hawaii, I guess, you know what I mean? And, I had a lot of pain inside of me due to not being able to, know my ancestry and only being able to access that wound. And what we were taught, not to be long-winded, but what we kind of taught about our own African-American culture is that it's a bastardized culture. We taught that, we lost, the things that made us African. We don't have them anymore, you know what I mean? Like, we had to make do with the scraps. And when I sat down with Marvel and said, hey, yo, for me to write this script, I need to go to the continent. I need to go, like, right now. They were like, man, go. And I went and started in South Africa because, it was really because Chadwick and Civil War and Dr. John Conley, they speak Osai, the dialect on the continent. And I went, I started there. I started there, and what I found was what I found as soon as I got there, and I started, and I was by myself, and I was hanging out with cats that was working in the hotel, and they took me back to their township, and they were like, hey, let's go do the ritual. We're gonna go do the ritual. And I'm like, oh, ritual. So I'm expecting like painted face and I'm expecting to go all the way in. Yeah. And what we pulled up at our house, and it was a bunch of young cats standing outside, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, this feels familiar, And then, we go in and we walk to the house, and then all the OGs, I say from age like 50 to 70 was sitting in one section. And I'm like, that's what happens at my house on the weekends. So then we keep going, and we go into the kitchen, and the women are in there cooking, and they talking, and they cooking all this food. And then you go out into the backyard, and there's some more young cats, like my age, and they had just slaughtered a cow and a goat. And they were, cooking the food, and they were passing around this real cool African beer, and everybody was drinking from the same. It was like a exactly calabash. And everybody was drinking from that. They passing it back and forth, and I'm like, man, what ritual is this? And they was like, oh yeah, this I can't remember the name. We've been doing this for thousands of years. And I was like, well, we do this same ritual back at home. and then for them it was a no-brainer. They was like, yeah, of course you do, because y'all African, And I realized then, I was like, oh wow, yeah, right, because whatever this evil thing that happened to us, you know what I'm saying? Unfortunately, they don't teach us anything beyond that, But what they did to us, it was no way they could wipe out what we were for thousands of years, you know what I'm saying? And it was right, something right there just made me completely whole. Like I was like, oh man, we've been African this whole time. When I stand outside, like when I hang with my family on the block in Oakland or Richmond, and all the youngsters stand outside, and my grandma's inside cooking, you know what I'm saying? And we being Africans, and even though we were told it was being hood or it was being something else, we was being true to what we've been for thousands and thousands of years. So I felt connected, you know, in a way that was very profound.
Give him a round of applause, please.